Sometimes you come across somebody's work and you're like, whoa,
Hmm.
I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
This is really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So that's what happened to me when I came across Amber Campbell.
Okay.
Um, this guy is basically a data whiz,
Hmm.
but instead of working at, Google or Facebook or something,
Right.
he is tackling humanitarian crises around the globe
Wow.
using data.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and we're talking big leagues here. The World Food Program, UNHCR, the WHO.
Oh, wow.
So in this deep dive, we're going to explore how someone with a background in computer science can end up changing lives through this really important thing called information management.
It is fascinating, isn't it, how data, which can seem so abstract, can
Mhm.
be this powerful tool for understanding and responding to human needs in emergencies and a government project.
Absolutely. And Campbell's story takes us to some pretty intense places. We're going to go to Sudan,
Okay.
Cambodia, Egypt, Iraq, Nigeria, Ethiopia. It's like a world tour of humanitarian work.
Wow. A real testament to the global reach of information management in this field.
Definitely. So to kind of kick things off, maybe we can start with his background. Where did he even get started on this path?
Well, his academic background is really a great place to start if you want to understand his trajectory. He began with a strong foundation in computer science from Future University in Sudan, and then he went on to earn a master's degree in geoinformatics from Linköping University in Sweden.
Geoinformatics. Now that sounds incredibly specialized.
It is. It's essentially the science of collecting, analyzing, and visualizing geographic data.
Okay.
And Campbell's master's thesis, this is really interesting, it actually focused on developing a mobile GIS application for emergency medical care.
GIS. No, what's that stand for again?
Oh yeah, GIS stands for Geographic Information System,
Okay.
which is basically a way to map and analyze data that has a spatial component. So imagine being able to see on a map where medical emergencies are happening in real time,
Oh, wow.
and then using that information to dispatch ambulances more efficiently.
That's incredible. It sounds like he was already thinking about the practical applications of technology in crisis situations from very early on.
Absolutely. And that focus on user-friendly solutions is critical in humanitarian work.
Yeah,
You know, the technology needs to be accessible and easy to use for people on the ground.
makes sense. So with this very unique skill set, where does his career actually begin?
Well, his first job was as a GIS officer for the World Health Organization
Okay.
during the Darfur crisis in Sudan.
Wow, talk about jumping right into the deep end.
I know, talk about a trial by fire. He was responsible for mapping the crisis, collecting data on the location of displaced populations, health facilities, all that critical infrastructure.
Oh, I can only imagine how challenging that must have been, dealing with a complex emergency in such a volatile environment.
Exactly. But you know what? This experience, it likely gave him invaluable insight into the role that data plays in coordinating aid effectively, making sure that the resources reach the right people,
Hmm.
and, understanding the scale and the nature of a crisis like that.
Yeah, it's like he was laying the groundwork for all his future work by getting that hands-on experience in such a high-pressure situation.
Yeah, definitely. And from there, he moved on to Cambodia, where he managed the World Food Programme's Humanitarian Response Forum.
Okay, so this is interesting because it seems like a shift from reacting to immediate emergencies to proactively preparing for potential disasters.
It is.
So less about putting out fires and more about fireproofing the house, so to speak.
That is such a great analogy.
Okay, good.
In this role, Kambal worked very closely with the Cambodian National Disaster Management Authority to optimize their emergency response platforms.
So what does that actually look like in practice? I mean, how do you optimize an emergency response platform?
Well, one key aspect was developing data standards. Just imagine different organizations responding to a disaster, but each one is collecting data in their own way.
Right.
Using different formats and different definitions, it would be a nightmare trying to make sense of all that information.
Yeah.
So Kambal worked to create a common language for data collection, so everyone was on the same page. Information could be shared seamlessly.
That makes so much sense. It's like creating a universal translator for disaster response.
Exactly. He was also instrumental in supporting data sharing platforms, essentially building systems that allow different organizations to easily and securely share information with each other.
This seems like a recurring theme in his work. The importance of not just having data, but having it be accessible and usable by everyone involved.
You're picking up on a crucial point. Effective data sharing isn't just about technology.
Right.
It's about building trust and collaboration between all these different organizations.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that everyone has a piece of the puzzle, and by working together, they can create a more complete picture of the situation.
And that brings us to his next role, right?
Yes.
Where does he go after Cambodia?
He moves on to become an intersector coordination officer with UNHCR in Egypt.
UNHCR.
Yes.
Okay.
And his focus there was ensuring data sharing best practices among the different working groups that were involved in the regional refugee and resilience plan.
Okay, so break that down a bit for us. What is this, what did you call it? The 3RP?
Yeah, they call IF the 3RP for short.
Okay.
And what kind of challenges was he facing in terms of data sharing? So the 3RP, it's essentially a framework for coordinating humanitarian assistance and development efforts for refugees and displaced persons in a particular region.
Right.
In this case, it involved multiple countries in the Middle East and North Africa. The challenge that Combal faced was getting all these different organizations, each with their own priorities and data systems, to work together effectively.
So once again, it sounds like he was playing the role of a data diplomat, bringing everyone to the table and finding common ground.
Exactly. He was developing tools, advocating for best practices, and essentially ensuring that everyone was speaking the same language when it came to using data to assist refugees.
It's really striking how his career seems to be building on itself, each role adding another layer of experience and expertise in using data to address these humanitarian challenges.
Absolutely. And from this international coordination role, he takes on a more focused project management position with the World Food Program in Iraq.
Okay, so tell us about his work in Iraq. What was the focus there?
He was leading projects to digitize social protection programs.
Okay.
These are programs designed to provide financial assistance or other forms of support to vulnerable populations, helping them meet their basic needs and build resilience.
So it sounds like he was using technology to streamline aid delivery and make those programs more efficient.
Exactly. He was working on things like developing digital registration systems for beneficiaries, creating online platforms for partners to collaborate, and implementing data analysis tools to track program performance.
It's really fascinating to see how technology can be used to empower people and make those safety nets more effective.
It's a prime example of how data can be used to improve people's lives, ensuring that those who need help the most are able to access it.
His work in Iraq seems like a natural progression from his previous roles, combining his technical skills with his experience in coordinating these complex programs and working with a variety of different stakeholders.
You're absolutely right. And this sets the stage for his next chapter, which takes us to...
Wait, before we move on, can we just pause and acknowledge how impressive this guy's resume is? I mean, we've only covered the first few years of his career, and he's already worked with WHO, WFP, UNHCR on some incredibly complex challenges. It's mind-boggling.
It is truly remarkable, and it really speaks to the growing importance of information management in the humanitarian field.
Yeah.
Organizations are recognizing that data is essential for making informed decisions, coordinating effectively, and ultimately having a greater impact on the lives of those they serve.
Okay, so with that in mind, let's hear about his next move. Where does his journey take him next?
His journey takes him to the heart of information management in the humanitarian world.
Okay.
IMAP.
Oh, right, IMAP.
You remember we mentioned them earlier.
Yeah.
This organization dedicated to improving humanitarian response through effective use of information.
Oh, right. So he goes from using information management in various roles to actually leading an organization that specializes in it.
Exactly. And he first served as IMAP's country representative in Ethiopia,
Oh, right.
where he played a crucial role in building these partnerships with both local and international organizations. His focus was on integrating those partnerships to make sure that IMAP's work aligned with broader humanitarian objectives in the country.
That leadership experience in Ethiopia must have been great preparation for his next move, right?
Absolutely. It equipped him to tackle the complexities of leading IMAP in Nigeria,
Okay.
a country facing a multitude of challenges. We're talking conflict, displacement, food insecurity, health emergencies, you name it. He was essentially stepping onto a new playing field, one where data becomes a critical tool in navigating and addressing these crises.
So what does leading IMAP in Nigeria actually entail? I mean, what kind of work are they doing on the ground?
Think of IMAP as like a support system for other humanitarian organizations.
Okay.
They provide the expertise in information management that many organizations might lack.
Gotcha.
They're like data consultants who come in and help organizations collect, analyze, and share information more effectively.
So they're not necessarily on the front lines distributing aid, but they're equipping those who are with the information they need to do it effectively.
Exactly. So they might help an organization set up a system for tracking the distribution of food aid, making sure it reaches the intended recipients, that there's no wastage.
Okay.
Or they might develop a mobile app that allows aid workers in the field to collect data on the needs of displaced populations quickly and efficiently.
It sounds incredibly versatile, adapting to the specific needs of each organization and each situation. Can you give us some concrete examples of the types of data they're collecting and how it's actually being used to improve the humanitarian response?
Sure. One powerful example is their work in tracking displacement patterns in northeast Nigeria,
Okay.
a region heavily impacted by conflict.
Right.
Imagine trying to coordinate aid in an area where people are constantly on the move, where access is limited, and the situation is just rapidly changing.
It sounds incredibly chaotic and challenging.
It is, and that's where IMAP's expertise becomes invaluable.
Okay.
They use a variety of sources to get a clear picture of displacement. This includes satellite imagery to identify new settlements, reports from aid workers on the ground, and even feedback gathered directly from affected communities.
So they're piecing together this multi-layered understanding of what's happening on the ground, drawing on both technology and human intelligence.
Exactly. And this allows them to create a dynamic map that shows where displaced populations are moving and what their needs are, in real time. This information then becomes crucial for making informed decisions about where to set up camps, how to distribute aid effectively, and what types of assistance are most urgently needed.
So it's not just about collecting data for the sake of it. It's about using it to guide action and make the response more targeted and efficient. It's data with a purpose.
Precisely. And this data-driven approach extends to other areas as well. For instance, IMAP also works on tracking the availability of essential services in displacement camps, things like healthcare facilities, access to clean water, and sanitation.
Right.
By monitoring these indicators, they can identify potential problems early on and alert relevant organizations to take action before those problems escalate into full-blown crises.
It's almost like a preventative approach to humanitarian aid, addressing issues before they become major emergencies.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about anticipating needs, allocating resources effectively, and ultimately contributing to saving lives.
But we can't talk about data collection, especially in vulnerable communities, without addressing the ethical considerations, right?
Yeah.
But how does IMAP ensure that they're handling this sensitive information responsibly?
That's a crucial point. And IMIP takes data privacy very seriously.
Good.
They have strict protocols in place to make sure that any personal information collected is anonymized
Right.
and used solely for humanitarian purposes.
Okay.
They're not sharing this data with governments or using it for any purpose other than improving the humanitarian response.
So transparency and consent are key aspects of their approach.
Absolutely. They work closely with communities, explaining how the data is being used,
Right.
obtaining consent before they collect any information. It's about building trust and ensuring that people feel comfortable sharing their information, knowing that it will be used ethically and responsibly.
It's a good reminder that even with the best intentions, data collection needs to be done thoughtfully and with respect for the individuals involved.
And it highlights the human element that underpins all of this work.
Yeah.
Data is not just an abstract concept. It represents real people, real stories, real needs.
Now, before we move on to Kambal's current work in Nigeria,
Okay.
there's one thing that's been on my mind throughout this entire deep dive.
Yeah.
We've been talking about all these different organizations,
Yeah.
different crises, different countries,
Mm-hmm.
but the common thread is Armor Kambal.
Right.
What do you think drives him to do this work?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
And while we can't know for sure what motivates him personally, we can look at his career trajectory and see this consistent commitment to using his skills to make a tangible difference in the world. He could be working in any number of fields, but he's chosen to apply his expertise to addressing humanitarian challenges.
Yeah.
It suggests a deep sense of purpose, a belief in the power of information to improve lives.
It's inspiring, to say the least. And it makes me wonder about all the other data heroes out there, the people who are quietly working behind the scenes, using their skills to make a real difference in the world. It's a side of data we don't often hear about.
You're absolutely right. And it highlights the importance of sharing these stories, of showing how data can be a force for good.
Hmm.
It's not just about numbers and algorithms. It's about using those tools to connect with people, understand their needs, and create a more just and equitable world.
Well, I'm definitely feeling inspired, and I'm eager to hear more about what Kamble is currently doing in Nigeria.
So we've explored his journey from those early days, responding to the Darfur crisis,
Right.
to his leadership in harnessing data for social protection programs.
Hmm.
Now, let's delve into the present, where he's leading IMAP in Nigeria,
Okay.
a country, as we mentioned, grappling with a multitude of humanitarian challenges.
It sounds like he's taken on quite a responsibility.
He has.
What are some of the specific ways IMAP is making a difference in Nigeria under his leadership?
One area where they've been incredibly active is in the northeast region of the country,
Okay.
which has been heavily affected by conflict and displacement.
Right.
IMAP is supporting the humanitarian response there by providing crucial information to aid organizations.
Can you give us a specific example of how they're using data to address those challenges?
Absolutely. One of the biggest challenges in any humanitarian crisis is understanding the needs of the affected population.
Right.
In northeast Nigeria, you have conflict that has forced people to flee their homes,
Yeah.
creating this constantly shifting landscape of displacement.
Right.
To address this, IMAP has been working with partners to develop a system for tracking displacement patterns in real time.
How does that actually work? I mean, what kind of information are they collecting?
They use a multifaceted approach.
Okay.
They analyze satellite imagery to identify new settlements that have popped up as a result of displacement.
Okay.
They gather reports from aid workers who are on the ground and have firsthand knowledge of the situation. And they even incorporate feedback gathered directly from the displaced communities themselves,
Wow.
ensuring that the information reflects the lived experiences of those affected.
So it's a combination of high-tech tools like satellite imagery and on-the-ground information gathered from people directly impacted by the crisis.
Precisely. By combining those different sources, IMFP is able to create a dynamic map that shows where displaced populations are moving,
Oh.
what their most pressing needs are.
Hmm.
This information is then shared with other aid organizations, allowing them to target their assistance more effectively.
So it's like they're creating this real-time snapshot of the crisis, which is constantly being updated as the situation evolves.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
This kind of information is crucial for making informed decisions about where to set up camps, how to distribute aid efficiently, and what kind of assistance is most urgently needed.
Right.
It allows aid organizations to be more responsive,
Yeah.
to adapt to the changing needs on the ground, and ultimately to reach the people who need help the most.
It sounds like they're playing a critical role in coordinating the overall humanitarian response.
They are.
Yeah.
And their work extends beyond just mapping displacement.
Okay.
They also use data to track the availability of essential services in displacement camps: healthcare, water, sanitation, education.
It sounds like a very holistic approach, ensuring that people have access to those basic necessities for survival and well-being.
Exactly. By monitoring these indicators, IMAP can identify potential problems early on, like a shortage of medical supplies or a lack of clean water.
Right.
This allows them to alert the relevant organizations
Okay.
and hopefully address the issues before they escalate into full-blown crises.
It's like a preventative approach to humanitarian aid, addressing problems before they become major emergencies.
Precisely. And it underscores the power of data to not just react to crises, but to anticipate needs
Right.
and allocate resources in a way that maximizes their impact.
We've talked a lot about the benefits of this data-driven humanitarian work, but I'm also curious about the challenges. What are some of the obstacles IMAP faces in carrying out this work in a complex environment like Nigeria?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is simply the lack of reliable data in many areas.
Okay.
Conflict and instability can disrupt data collection systems, making it difficult to get an accurate picture of what's happening on the ground.
So how do they overcome that? Do they have to get creative in how they gather information?
Absolutely. They often have to rely on alternative sources of data.
Okay.
Things like community feedback,
Right.
reports from local organizations, or even anecdotal evidence. This requires a lot of careful analysis and triangulation to ensure the information is as reliable as possible.
It must also be challenging to operate in a context where security is a major concern.
You're right. The safety of their staff is paramount,
Yeah.
and they have to take precautions to minimize risks when working in conflict-affected areas.
Right.
This might involve working remotely,
Okay.
relying on local partners to collect data, or carefully coordinating their movements with security forces.
It sounds like an incredibly demanding job, requiring not just technical skills, but also adaptability, resourcefulness, and a deep commitment to the mission.
Absolutely. And it's important to acknowledge the dedication of individuals like Amr Campbell and the countless other humanitarian workers who are putting themselves on the line to make a difference in the world.
Well, I think we all gained a much deeper understanding of the crucial role data plays in humanitarian work. What's a final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with as we wrap up this deep dive?
I'd say this. Data has the power to transform the way we respond to humanitarian crises. It allows us to be more efficient, more targeted, and ultimately more effective in alleviating suffering and saving lives. But it's not just about the technology itself. It's about using data responsibly, ethically, and with a deep understanding of the human needs it represents.
That's a powerful message. And for anyone who wants to learn more about Amr Campbell's work or support organizations like IMMA, we'll be sure to include links in the show notes. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been an eye-opening exploration of the intersection of data and humanitarian action.